Procedural texturing. I was gonna restart it, but that's just a stupid, weird, off-putting way to start a video, so I'm gonna leave it in there. Sorry guys. Procedural texturing, part 5. Alright, so maybe we do this, and this is cool, but maybe I want some scratches on the other part of this. I just want to show you guys how you can sort of map in more scratches into this, and get different sort of effects with that. So, what we have here is our mix with our corner scratches. We have one that combines the corner scratches and the dirt. We need another mix node, mix shader. And I'm just going to say mix scratches. And what this one is going to be is we want our chrome again. I should relabel this. So this is now gold, actually, and it turns out that orange is now purple because anarchy has happened. Okay, so grab our mixed scratches, grab the gold again. I'll throw that into shader 1. And in this case, we want the other nodes that we'd look for. So I'm just going to grab the scratch texture for now. I'll grab that and throw that into shader 2. Now, if you remember from the first video where you can see the weird legacy partially rendered teapot here, if you put in a checker texture or a noise texture or whatever, you can use that to control where your textures show up. So I'm going to do that here. But instead of using just making sure I'm recording, perpetually paranoid. Instead of using a hideous checker texture, I'm going to go in and map in a file texture. Find your file in question. So in this case, I have no idea where to put this. I put this in my downloads folder, and oh goodness. Somewhere. I put this in my downloads folder. I swear it's there. Scratches! Haha, JPEG. So I'm gonna grab that. This is just a random crappy internet texture I found. And if we play that, probably nothing's gonna happen by default. Usually you're gonna have to go through and hit alpha as luminance for this. And let me just make sure. Okay. Oh, right. Anyone want to take a guess why this isn't working? I realized I forgot to add, again, the correct texture to this. So if I make that the scratch texture, you'll see that now the scratches are showing up. And just for grins, I'm going to go back in here. Wait, where am I? Scratches. Let's wait. Alright, so again, alpha's luminance, usually we'll have to turn that on for these to show up. So again, I would like to state that this is UV based. If your UVs are trash, this texture is not going to show up well. I do expect, even if you're using procedural texturing, that, you know, I won't see giant UV seams and stuff. It is generally good to go through and customize your internet texture slightly, mostly to avoid UV seams. It's also, in my opinion, it's also good to go through and do it just so you don't have this like weird uniform scratch texture all over the place, and you have maybe, you know, a few targeted scratches. Because scratches you can't necessarily do with procedural texturing. That's more of, you kind of just gotta suck it up and hand draw them in. Procedural texturing is great for not having to go through and manually add scratches to every little corner and like add grime to every little grime or like, you know, crevice. In this case, I think this looks a little bit strange because of the order we plugged stuff in. So I'm going to sort of reorder this a little bit, because it feels weird to me. So we have the scratches on the edges, and that's fine. And then we have this dirt, but then we have scratches going over the dirt. And in my opinion, I think it would make more sense to have the dirt going over the scratches. So we can keep all the stuff we have, we just need to reorder some of the stuff. So what I'm going to do is, this is where the order of procedural texturing becomes important. So the first thing we have is, turn on the isolate mode. So the first thing we have is the mix where we do our scratches here. Then we're piping that in, basically, into the dirt, and we're adding dirt. And after we add dirt, we are adding more scratches. So what we actually want for this is the scratches, and basically all the scratches to be added at once, and then add the dirt on top. Whoopsie, wrong button. That actually looked really cool in the blue, I like that. Oops. Ah! I always clicked one button too far. Okay, turn that off. So what we want to do is basically switch the position of mixed scratches and dirt and scratches. And that's actually fairly straightforward to do. All we really need to do here, I'm just going to sort of, I was going to visually do that, that's gross. Alright, so we have this dirt scratch being piped in here. I'm going to disconnect that. Wait, that was my fill. Oops. Oops. What have I done? Reordering scratch. Weird. Alright, so I'm going to grab this. I will Oh, good lord. Sorry, I'm looking at my mixed scratches, and I should be looking at the dirt. I'm insane. Okay. This is why it is good practice to label things semi-logically. I'm actually just going to disconnect all of this stuff temporarily, because I've confused myself. Okay. So I'm going to leave the mix nodes hooked up, because I already have that stuff, and that should be fine. What I'm going to do is visually move this, so the scratches, we have the corner scratches, and the mix scratches, and the dirt scratch. It's kind of like laid out in the order that we want it hooked up. Then what I'm going to do is go back and reattach everything. So I need this mix scratches. This should be piped into either shader 1 or shader 2 of this dirt scratch. And we want our filth texture piped in also, piped in also to this dirt scratch. So dirt scratch should be pretty much set up. This is where it gets a little bit weird if you start mapping the same stuff in. It just like visually gets to be a lot of lines crossing over each other, so it's good to just sort of like label things and pay attention to what you're doing. And just sort of good management of your hypershade is important when doing this, otherwise you'll get really confused. Alright, so we have this new scratch node we just made. We need shaders in this. So I'm going to grab my corner scratch shader and throw that in. And in this case, I want... Oof, that looks bad. I put that in the wrong... We'll figure it out, actually. So... I have no idea. This is where I said I always mess up where I'm putting my nodes. So we have the corner scratch texture, and this is, again, going to be our base purple with the original scratch that we did in, like, the second video. Basically, at this point, you can actually kind of see it's, like, anywhere gray. It's like, cool, this is the other shader 1, which has no input. So all you want to do is grab your original gold texture, grab the out color, and put that into the shader. And you'll see that now we actually have fairly not terrible looking scratches. So we have the corner scratches, and then we have these little extra scratches we've manually added. And this is the power of procedural texturing, is again, you can do this all, like if I was doing this in Photoshop, it would take me forever. I'd have to make a separate map for the metalness, the reflectiveness, the shininess. Whereas now I can basically just make a single shader and just use that forever, and just sort of plug it in, basically using these mix weights as different masks to reveal different properties at specific places. So again, we have like our mixed scratches and our dirt scratch here, and in this case, now because I've changed the order of things, I actually have the wrong shader applied to my object. Dirt scratch is now the final mix, so I have currently these scratches applied. So if I go through and I add the existing material dirt scratch to this, oof, methinks I've hooked up the nodes incorrectly. Like I said, every time. I screw it up every time. So I could just cheat and sort of invert. There's two ways to handle this. One is to go into your file node, and apparently you need to do this through the attribute editor, but if you go under color balance, sorry, not color balance, effects, and invert, you can basically turn black to white and white to black. Oh god, that still looks terrible. And this is for the scratch textures. I don't know why I'm doing that for that. That doesn't make sense. Sorry. Okay, so we go into the AI color correct in this case, because this is the one. AI color correct is the one being mapped into here. There's also a button for invert. So theoretically, you could invert that. In this case, I think the better option would be just switch the colors. Just switch the inputs really quick. So grab this, pipe it into shader 1, and just throw that into shader 2. And now you have something that makes much more sense. In general, I think it's better to avoid doing the invert if you can. It just saves a little bit of computing, and that maybe will buy you a tiny second or two of render time here and there, which honestly, if you're rendering a bunch of frames, is kind of worth it. It's also just more organized, because that way you're not worrying about, you know, if you change a value in here, like, how is that affecting the invert, and it's just like, it's more straightforward if you don't need to think about that. So now what we have is corner scratches, scratches, and then dirt over the scratches, which I think just looks a little bit more naturalistic. And this is actually pretty much all I did for... I did one or two more things for ShaderBot, I'll go over that in a minute. But this is pretty much all I've done for this robot here. So if we compare these two, you can see that, you know, we have the same thing, finger... Cough. The finger is a pretty good example, actually, of this, where he has the little highlighting around the edges of his fingers. He has, like, blue, painty, you know, whatever material. And then I've gone through and just added grime to his little crevices, and a bunch of just sort of random scratches all over his body, like a crazy person. This is, like I said, pretty much all I've done. This is, even just this is really powerful. We can make it even more powerful. Muhaha. So I'm going to show you how to go through and like break up some of these textures and make this feel a little bit nicer. And I'll also show you how to do something like add, you know... Actually, I'm going to show you a different node. It's like a different way to approach some of these options. And then I'll also show you, like, right now this guy has dust on him. So I'll show you how to add dust. And that pretty much will be it for procedural texturing. So join me in the other video for something. I'll decide in 10 seconds what I'm covering next. Haha.